What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with my Week 10 college football playoff rankings. This week, I'll break down all the top 25 teams heading into Week 10. But before we get into it, subscribe to my channel and you'll be entered in my giveaway. Dropping from this week's rankings are the Duke Blue Devils. Didn't even score a point against Louisville on the road. Now have lost 3 of the last 4, and they were due to drop from the rankings. And the others receiving votes, I didn't put Kansas in even after upsetting Oklahoma. Kansas State is just on the cusp, as long as Fresno State as well. Then Oklahoma State and Miami are looking to claw their way back into the rankings as we head into this week. At 25, I kept the Tar Heels in. And yeah, they've lost 2 straight to, not some good teams. Georgia Tech and Virginia aren't the best in the ACC, but they didn't, get blown out. It was just a tough luck loss. The defense failed them in this one. And, they got to step it up here if they still want a chance to compete for an ACC championship. Luckily, they get FCS opponent Campbell this week to hopefully get back on track. Liberty moves up 1 after beating Western Kentucky last Tuesday. They ran all over Western Kentucky, 323 rushing yards, and it's hard for me to imagine this team not finishing 12-0. Caden Salter has looked great in, his limited time throwing the ball, but he's more of a ground game is where he is most effective, and this is a hard running team. And look for the Flames, to coast to another win. At 23, I have USC. They're moving up 1 even after a 1-point win on the road against Cal. And they were down 14 in the fourth, had a rally for the come behind win. The defense, yet again, is letting this team down. They probably should have won this one 50-20 at worst. But, the defense just is non-existent. And against Washington, it's going to have to be kind of one of these games where it's going to be back and forth if USC wants to win. 22 is Tulane. They squeaked past Rice on the road, and they put up 27-30 in the first half, so they didn't do anything in the second half moving the ball. Michael Pratt has looked good. Makai Hughes has done well, and it's hard for me to not see this team playing SMU in the ACC or AAC championship game. James Madison, undefeated still after winning by 3 against Old Dominion. It's their 11th win in a row dating back to last year, and this week at Georgia State will decide if they are going to finish the year possibly 12-0 and reach the Sun Belt Championship and win the East, because Georgia State is that other team that could vouch for them. But if they lose this game, James Madison's probably fallen out of the rankings. If they win, then they might get a big tick up because Georgia State is a very solid team. UCLA is jumping back into my rankings, and it's kind of an overdue. I really haven't put them in because I didn't feel like they were right there, but win over Colorado showed me that this team is a top 25 team. Ethan Gabrius has looked great. Logan Loya, his top receiver in this one, looked great as well. And TJ Harden got it done on the ground. So this defense really came through what it matters most, getting 7 sacks and a dominant performance, stopping Shedeur. And now they go to Arizona, which is a very good game. Arizona is one of those teams that could find themselves in the rankings, even with 3 losses. Those 3 losses have been 2 in overtime and 1 in a close loss as well. And that Wildcat team is a team you do not want to face right now. Utah drops to 19 after just an awful performance against Oregon at home. And this is where you need Cam Rising in this game. Bryson Barnes just couldn't get it done. But they have a chance to possibly salvage their season, beat Washington this year, pull off an upset, and possibly knock them out of the college football playoff. Oregon State falls as well, as they lost to Arizona, who I was just talking about. And they still have Washington and at Oregon to close this year. So they got Colorado this week, another team next week, and then those 2. And they could possibly finish this season 8-4 best, I think. I don't think they beat Oregon and Washington, but they got to go to Colorado, go to Boulder, and get a bounce back win. And, that's going to be a tough ask as well. Tennessee moves up 1 after beating Kentucky on the road. Joe Milton played well in this one, only 3 incompletions, Jalen Wright 2. And the offense milked the clock at the end to just escape with that victory, as unfortunately the Kentucky player got hurt with 44 seconds, induced the 10-second runoff to 34. So then they didn't even have to hike it on 4th down. But this Vol team, they get UConn, and if they can somehow beat Missouri and Georgia, then maybe they're that 10-2, maybe win the SEC that squeaks in to the playoff at 11-2. Air Force is still undefeated after they beat Colorado State on the road, moving up to 16 here. And they ran all over Colorado State. And Zach Larrier didn't have his best game running or passing, but he still was a factor in this one. Emmanuel Michel, great game yet again. Now they get Army, and they should take care of business there against Army, move to 9-0. You can see there, Army, Hawaii, UNLV, Boise State. Those UNLV, Boise State games are going to be where we find out if they're going to probably pick up one of their losses. At 15, I have Louisville, and they're moving up 4 spots because they beat Duke at home, didn't even let them score. And after the loss in the bye week, they came out and just dominated in this one. The defense, especially, only allowing a little over 200 yards. Jack Plummer, not his best showing, but he didn't have to do much. It was all Jawhar Jordan on the ground, really taking care of business in this one. Should go in, beat Virginia Tech at home. Then that game at Miami could decide the ACC for the rest of the year and could be possibly facing the Florida State Seminoles when it's all said and done. Missouri comes out of a bye, getting Georgia. So they've had 2 weeks to prepare for Georgia. We can see what they're made of so far this year. And if they can pull off a win in Georgia, they're definitely jumping up at least in the top 10, possibly top 5. They still have Tennessee as well. So I think if you were to tell me that this team is a possible 10-win team at this point at the beginning of the season, I wouldn't have said yes. I would probably say around 6-6 at best, but this team has been looking good. Let's see if they can keep that momentum up. And the other Tiger team coming out of the bye, you got the LSU Tigers, and they get Bama on the road. So 2 great SEC matchups this week to decide what the conference is going to look like. And they've put up 34 points in 7 straight weeks. This game is going to decide the SEC West. And if they can win this one, they'll beat Bama for the second time in as many years. And it's all going to rely on Jayden Daniels. If he can come out, perform how he has been, then it's going to be tough for me to imagine this LSU team not escaping with a win because LSU can put up points where Bama, they struggle to do that. Notre Dame takes care of business, destroying Pittsburgh at home, forcing 5 turnovers. Sam Hartman didn't have to do much. Audric Estimine did it all, running the ball. And this is their toughest game of the year that they have left. Only 3 games left at Clemson, but Clemson hasn't looked the same as it had in years, and I expect Notre Dame to go in there and get a win. Ole Miss sits at 11, and they idle here after beating Vanderbilt. Didn't have to do much in the second half as they had a big lead going into halftime. Jackson Dart, Quinshon Judkins, and Dayton Wade have looked good for this team. They face Texas A&M at home, get a win there, move to 8-1, possibly jump in the top 10, and Ole Miss could be that team that hangs around going in the last 2 weeks of the season that possibly has a chance at a college football playoff berth if things go their way. At 10, Penn State stays after beating Indiana in a very concerning game from the offensive standpoint until the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter is where they shined with the last 3 minutes. The 57-yard touchdown pass finally letting Aller air it out, and it worked. And then the safety, and then got the ball back. So it just all worked for them at the end of the game. And they face Maryland and then Michigan. And that Michigan game is going to decide Penn State's fate in the Big Ten this year. And, it seems like they can't show up for this game. So maybe they'll show up for that one at home. Oklahoma drops from the top 5 after suffering their first loss this year on the road to Kansas. The offense couldn't do it when it mattered most. And they couldn't get the first down. And in doing so, they gave Kansas the ball back, immediately went down and scored. Then Oklahoma had a chance to possibly get the win, steal one on a Hail Mary, but it didn't work there. And this was more on Dillon Gabriel. Had his worst game of the year, at least throwing the ball. I know he only had 5 incompletions, but I expected more out of him in this game. I thought it would be like a high-scoring game where they're throwing the ball more, but it was more of a rushing attack for Oklahoma. Now it's a rivalry game at Oklahoma State. So, that one's going to be a close game as well. And Oklahoma, they need to get right here very quickly if this team still has a chance to make a college football playoff. Alabama comes out of the bye, still sitting at 8. And this arguably is the best one-loss team in the country. They still have LSU this week and then Kentucky, which decides how this Bama team is going to finish the year. And it's hard for me to imagine them not making the SEC championship if they lose or if they win this game. It's probably going to happen. And probably face Georgia in the championship, in which we almost decide which team's going to make the college football playoff. Texas stays at 7 after a big win at home against BYU. Malik Murphy shines in his first career start for the injured Ewers. The defense is the biggest question mark, though. They've played some inconsistent games, but still escaped. And, it's starting to face the facts of the Big 12. It's going to be Oklahoma, Texas in the championship. And, now that Oklahoma has lost, that's probably going to decide who makes the college football playoff if both those teams win out. Oregon's jumping all the way up to 6 in my books here after beating Utah on the road. They really didn't have a chance. Oregon just dominated from start to finish, and they still have some opportunities on their schedule to strengthen that schedule against USC and Oregon State. And California should be a blowover game. I know USC just beat them by 1, but they're not on the same level. And the team that beat Oregon is at 5 in Washington by 3. And this is the second straight win where I've kind of been concerned here. Yeah, I know they won on the road by 9, but it's just not as convincing as I thought it would be. And then the week before, kind of the same result against Arizona State. And they still have USC, Utah, Oregon State, Washington State. All four of those teams could pull off an upset at any time. And this is where the good teams become great teams. And Washington now has to run the table here. And if they win all four of those and possibly lose in the college football or in the Pac-12 championship to Oregon, it's gonna be tough for a committee to put Washington ahead of Oregon even after they beat them. So they got to win out. Ohio State stays at 4 after beating Wisconsin in kind of an ugly game, but they got it done when it mattered most. TreVeyon Henderson finally healthy and back was huge. You can see his numbers there. Same with Marvin Harrison, another great game for him. And yet again, it's going to come down to the game at Michigan at the end of the year in Ann Arbor. Going to decide which one of these teams is more than likely going to make the playoff. At 3, Florida State stays put, beating Wake Forest on the road, 34 points in the first half. Didn't really have too much of a challenge. They got at Florida and then Miami at home and possibly the ACC championship if they make it. And Florida State's really convincing me that this team is going to make the playoff. And yeah, they struggled early in the season, but they've really hit their groove now. And it's going to be really hard for me to see them slipping up at this point because I just don't see that happening. At 2, the Michigan Wolverines come out of the bye week, getting Purdue at home. And obviously the biggest thing with surrounding this program is the FBI investigation, the sign stealing scandal for Harbaugh, all that stuff. But you got to give credit to the players just putting that in the back burner. The defense, especially, allowing only 47 points in 8 games this year, which is a crazy stat. Only allowed 17 points in a second half all year. So if you're looking to beat Michigan, you're going to have to do it early and get on them. But when you got the potential Heisman winner at quarterback, that's a tough task to stop that offense. And maybe he doesn't have to throw the ball, so they'll just give it to Corum or Edwards that could really take over a game too. So that's what makes this Michigan team very scary. And at 1, for the 10th straight week, they haven't fallen out of 1 this whole year, are the Georgia Bulldogs. Take care of Florida in the rivalry game. And they put up 36 unanswered points after Florida's drive to start the game, went down, scored. Then they just went ghost, didn't exist, it felt like, in this one. And Brock Bowers, out for this game. Who knows how long he's out for. They didn't really need him in this one. They took care of business. Daijun Edwards had a great game. Ladd McConkey as well. But now they get the tougher part of their schedule they're going to have all year. Missouri, Mississippi, Tennessee, 3 straight ranked teams. And I think they are due for a slip up. And I'm not saying that just because I'm a Michigan fan and, I want Michigan at 1. But it just seems like Georgia has had some games where they haven't put teams away until the end. I mean, they've gotten better at it, in this Florida game included, but, it just doesn't seem like that same mojo has been there for the last 2 years. But that's going to be it for the Week 10 rankings. Make sure you guys check back next week to see if Georgia's still on top. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.